Git Rekt, and we did the Arcos burn navigator application. So in a burn resuscitation ICU at a hospital, time is extremely valuable because doctors have quite a number of patients, and in order to figure out the amount of resuscitation fluid to give each patient at the top of the hour, quite a bit of calculations are involved, and these can be time consuming, especially as you do them at each hour for every patient. So the goal for the burn navigator application is to automate these calculations, as well as provide or take away the element of human error to some degree, as well as make predictions for the future hours of that therapy. The burn navigator is currently only available for a iPad, a Windows tablet, and as a web app on a computer, which all imply the use of very bulky, large equipment. So we were tasked to put the application onto an Android system so that you could conveniently put it onto a compact mobile device and put it in your pocket and travel anywhere with it. The application is targeting doctors who are on the move, traveling away from the hospital to remote locations, so that if space is limited, they can pretty much always have the opportunity to bring the application in their pocket, and no matter what the storage limitations are. As for our personal experience throughout the semester, we worked very diligently almost every single day on this application, and I think we created a very solid product. We did face a few challenges throughout the way. Firstly, we started out the semester with MVC as our design pattern, and we found out later that this was limiting us a little bit. So we switched over to Redux, and many of us had never used Redux before, so we had to go through that process of switching all of our code over to the new design pattern, and that took a significant amount of time. Also, other challenges is that some of us had never created an Android application before. Some of us had never touched React Native, which is the platform we used, or the framework we used, and some of us had never even used JavaScript. So there was a little bit of a learning curve. But the key to our success, I believe, is our ability to communicate with each other. We use Slack to communicate, and we use Trello to stay organized. All of our tasks went into Trello, and we were able to organize when they were being worked on and when they were done. So that was pretty much our journey, I believe. So without any further introduction, let's talk about the app itself. So behind me, we have the initial page that comes up when you start the application. And this page is the patients list. So we're going to make a training patient so that we can automatically jump to the top of each hour. And so next we have the patient description. You can put characters, numbers, anything. We leave it up to the doctor to determine how they would like to describe the patient. Next there's the patient weight. This has validation, so I believe it's 400 kilograms is the max. It'll give you an error. And then we also have unit conversion. So if you're more comfortable in either imperial or metric, you can choose whichever one. We're going to do 50 for now. The height, something randomly, 50. And then that also has validation as well in it, and unit conversion. Next, we have the inter-elapsed time since burn. We have these nice little wheels that actually let the doctor input the time that has elapsed from the point that the burn actually happened to the point that they arrived at the hospital. And then as you actually change the wheels, you have this, this dynamically changing timestamp that changes with the wheels, so the doctor can perhaps check what they have on record to make sure that this matches exactly. Next, we can actually put in the percentage of the burn. This also has validation, so negative numbers aren't allowed. We require at least 1%, and also can't be over 100. We'll put something like 30. And then ordinarily, the doctor would actually estimate that percentage based off of these graphics here below. They choose the age, which determines the body size, and then based off of the actual locations of the burn, they can estimate that number in normal circumstances. Next, we will put in the primary fluid type under this drop-down menu. You select something random. Ordinarily, the doctor would have something in mind specifically. And then the recommended rate changes with the age. This is just an initial recommended rate. It'll actually go up or down based off of the hourly updates you do with the patient. So if you put in a child, it's lower, of course. We'll start with an adult for this demo, and then we'll add the patient. So now we have the home screen we get navigated to. There's a lot of different things going on here. I'll explain each one. In the top corner, we have this people button or icon, and it takes you back to the patients list where we originally started from. We'll show you that in a sec. In the middle, there's this banner showing the description that we created originally. In the top right corner, we have the activation and deactivation button. I explained before the active patients and archive patients. This is the button that allows you to manually put a patient into the archive section. So if you press it, you get an alert saying that they've been deactivated. And then we can actually check that our patient that we made has been added to the archives patients list. And then we can go back into the patient and activate them again whenever we want. Again, an alert saying that they've been activated. Next, we'll talk about the patient details button. This little Rolodex icon here will drop down a summary of all the information you inputted when you created the patient, including weight, height, size of burden, etc. You can press it again to close it. Next, we have in the home screen a summary of the more important items, like the primary fluid type. We chose normal saline. The current infusion rate, which for an adult is defaulted at 500, that will change later. And the next update time. Since this is a training patient, we actually have an independent clock that's running independently of the phone time. And so since we have to have that because once we press the update button, this will actually go up to the next hour. So that'll change from the actual time of the phone. Ordinarily, you would just see the time that you would give the next update if it were a regular patient. Down below, we have the notes section where you can add notes down a list. If you press plus, you can enter something random, anything the doctor is afraid to forget or they want to review after they visit other patients. Press the plus again, and you get your notes. This will actually go down a list, and you can scroll up and down and put in chronological order with the most recent one at top and the oldest one at bottom. And you get a little timestamp as well. Now I want to show you the actual hourly update. So if you press the hourly update, we get this push notification at the top. Did it render? Oh, there it is. Okay, we get this push notification. This is just simulating what would happen. Since we manually pressed hourly update, we didn't let the notification come up by itself. For the regular patient, you would get that automatically, and that tells you that you need to, at this point, put that hourly update in. So if we close that, we have the from time, the to time, and the time elapsed. We enter the amount of urine that was outputted by the patient in that time frame. Anywhere between 30 and 50 is optimal. And then there's the primary fluid type. We can change that at any time in any hourly update. Why don't you go ahead and change that to something else, the primary fluid. But at any time in an hourly update, then you can actually put in the infusion rate. This is the rate at which you put fluid into the patient during that time frame. Since we only have 5 minutes of duration, and I'd like to see a more significant volume graph that shows you something meaningful, we're going to put in something large. Maybe 7,000, 5,000, trust me on this one. Because only 5 minutes passed. Ordinarily, you put something in smaller, but if we only put in a small value, you'd see something so small you wouldn't be able to see it, so that's we're doing it that way. The additional fluids here, you can select down this drop-down menu and select any of the additional fluids. You just pick something random and add it. Once you choose something else, or you can delete it, but can you choose one other one? All right, choose something random. I just want to show you how we can delete them. But after you press the check, it adds it to this list. And if you accidentally added one that you didn't mean to, you can delete it with the minus button. And then we have our list of hourly updates there. And the next hour, when you give the next hourly update, it will actually give this recommended infusion rate as the defaulted infusion rate that you see above. So it just lets you, decide in the future what you plan to do. So if we submit the hourly update with the button below, now we see, since we started out with a very, very small, I believe it was under an hour for the time since burned, it's starting right at the very far left. Ordinarily, if you had, when you made the patient, if you inputted 2 or 3 hours since the time of burn, it would start out here somewhere. However, we added quite a bit, so this actually went up quite a large amount. This little triangle here represents the cumulative volume that you are entering for that patient, and it'll actually start to accumulate larger and larger as you add more hourly updates. So it's starting out here. If I were to add more, it would extend up and up and up, depending on how much you added each hour. And you see how it's yellow right now? That's because it's hard to see from here, but this cumulative volume actually exceeded past this yellow Parkland line here. And if it were below the yellow Parkland line, it would be green. This is just marking checkpoints, telling the doctor that something wrong is occurring or if you're right on track. Anywhere between right at the bottom all the way to right under the yellow Parkland line, it will always be green. And then as it goes above, it turns yellow. And as you get way above these Parkland yellow lines, it starts to scale out and zoom outward. And once you get high enough, you'll see these orange warning line, and if you zoom up, you'll have the red danger line. And they're just flat lines that show at the top. And we'll show you an example of how that works later. Let's show the tables.
Oh, because we got a notification because they hit the top of the hour.
Oh, got it. Okay, so you see how 4 o'clock happened? We got an extra notification for one of our other patients. So that's proving that that works. So every top of the hour, you'll get a notification. But now we're looking at the IO tables. So this is just for each column that is created, that represents an hourly update that we inputted. Of course, we only have one hourly update so far. And it's just a summary of everything that you inputted for that update, including the time that it occurred, the time that you inputted the hourly update, the hours post-burn, the urine output, infusion rate, etc. One thing I'd like to point out is that we've only used one primary fluid so far, but as you start to use more, these will start to stack up underneath. And the same with the additional fluids. As you use more additional fluids, as you use them, it'll dynamically add these to this list, only using the ones that you've actually introduced into the therapy at some point. And of course, you have the cumulative fluids that should match the rightmost amount in the volume graph. Now looking at the IO graphs, we have two different graphs. The very first one is the fluids given, and the first tick mark will always be the time of burn, and that was at 15:53. And a very short time later, we gave our first hourly update at 1600 hours. And this is actually meaning 1 hour post-burn and then time of burn, and this is the actual time right above it. In dark blue, we have the primary fluids that were given, and in light blue, we have the additional fluids that were given. So they're stacked on top of each other. As for the urine output, we have, of course, on the y-axis, the milliliters, and the x-axis, the time. This green horizontal bar right here represents the optimal zone for urine output. It's between 30 and 50. And this bar right here, and all the consecutive bars that occur afterward, will change color based off of its relative position to this horizontal bar. If it's below, it'll be yellow. If it's right in between, it'll be green as it is now. And if it's above, it'll be red. But we're going to show you an example of that right now, actually. In the interest of time, we actually had some pre-made patients that have quite a number of hourly updates in them. This first one we're going to show you has somewhere around 10. And originally, we were trying to make it so the first patient had a green area, but we accidentally added a little bit too much, so it actually ended up being yellow anyways. But this is another example of how it exceeds past the yellow line, and it turns yellow. In the tables, I'd like to show you how it scales with many hourly updates. So since we entered a lot of data, there's a lot going on here. But once you get about 4 or 5 hourly updates, it has to kick in the scrolling feature. So you can scroll from left to right, see all your data in one place, the most recent being on the right side. And as I mentioned earlier, these started stacking up here for the primary and the additional fluids. So we've only used 3 primary fluids throughout the whole therapy, so we have 3 listed, and the same for additional fluids, we have 4. So yes, that's about it for scaling for that. I'd like to see the IO graphs now. So we actually just implemented, oh, you have a question?
1 minute.
1 minute, okay. We implemented a very sophisticated scrolling mechanism here. It starts out scrolled at the most recent data, and if you want to see your older data, you have a single arrow that goes one at a time for hourly updates. So there we go. The emulator is a little slow on our computers, and on the real phone it's much faster. And then if you want to scroll much faster, you have the double arrow left and right that goes 6 at a time. And if you scroll backwards, okay, and if you are anywhere in the scrolling position or anywhere in the actual data, you can go back to your most recent data just by pressing the refresh button. And you see how it jumps back to the most recent data. And then like I said before, You see the yellow bars are lower than this green. So we have, they're yellow, of course. The green ones are in between, so they're green. And these bars that are greater than are red. So a couple more features I want to show if you go to the home. If you go to the second patient we created, I just want to show what happens whenever you have a lot of fluid. So now that we've gone high enough in the volume amount, we've made it so that these orange warning lines and the danger warning line have appeared. They only appear when you approach them. And also, since we have passed the orange warning line, it has turned orange. This area is now orange to tell the doctor that something wrong is occurring and you need to decrease your fluid amount. And then lastly, I'd like to show one more patient. And this just displays what happens when you pass the red line. Of course, it goes red, which also displays that something terribly wrong is going on. You're probably hurting your patient and you need to reduce your fluid amount. So it's just a way to explicitly tell the doctor that something needs to be done differently. One other thing I'd like to point out is if you go to the home, this manual deactivation activation button right here, we actually set it up so that no matter what, after 72 hours of therapy, it automatically sets into archive. So whether you press the button or not, after 72 hours, the therapy is done. That was by our sponsor's request. That's about it for our major functionalities. Would anyone like to ask any questions?
Thank you. 15 plus 1 minute, by the way.
Sorry.
That's okay. I have one question. In the table, there are certain elements where, say, had a font color of blue and orange. Not orange, but yes,
Green and blue.
yes. Well, so, is there any reason why some are in green and some are in blue?
It's just to differentiate between listed items and these default items that are always going to be there. These black ones are always going to be there, but these green ones are going to be all-inclusive in the primary fluids list. So as you start using individual primary fluids, they start getting added below the total primary fluids row. And the same for the blue. This represents exclusively additional fluid types that you have used throughout the therapy. You have your total additional fluids, and then listed here in blue lets you, it differentiates between this list and the other ordinary items. So that's why they're colored differently.
Okay.
Where's the data being stored?
It gets stored locally on a realm database on the device. Yeah, by our sponsor's request, they said that it makes people feel a little uncomfortable when they pass data through the airways to remote servers. So they said that it makes people a little more comfortable if everything's stored internally, so you can't intercept that data. Maybe. Question?
Is this a tablet app only, or is it supposed to run on smartphone as well?
I think it'll run on any Android device. Yeah, which is primarily smartphones. Yes?
Any Android device? Is there a minimum SDK level?
We have it set up for SDK 23 right now. But have we tested it on newer ones?
Should work on Android 6.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Yes.
Can you delete fluids?
Delete hourly updates?
No, like fluids, like those green or blue at this point.
No, because to do that, you would actually have to, for example, here's this hourly update, and let's say that this is the only time I used it. The only way this would go away is if I deleted this, because if I use it, it's going to display it. There's like 10 of these, and as you use any of those 10, they are going to be added to this list. So unless you delete an hourly update, which we actually we didn't have the time to implement that, but we would have liked to if we had time to make it so you can actually delete hourly updates. But I'm thinking hypothetically, if I were to delete this, then that one would go away. But they need to be there because there are updates that have that in it, and you have to display that data. Anyone else?
How about correction? Not deleting it, correcting it. Let's just say assume that you typed a wrong number, but later on you figure out that hey, I typed a wrong number. So is there a way to fix the existing data, or?
Admittedly, we did not have the time to
Okay.
implement the update nor the deleting of hourly updates. It was something that we had in our back pocket, but we just didn't do it in time.
I see. Sponsors, in terms of features and quality of features and UI UX, are you satisfied with this?
We're extremely satisfied.
Oh, extremely satisfied.
Yeah, they definitely went beyond the requirements that we gave them.
Okay.
We have a commercial product that's been in use for 5 years. We did not give them the code. But they've implemented new features like the swiping that you see that aren't here now. They came up with creative new solutions that aren't in the current commercial products, like being able to very quickly rotate how long ago the burn occurred in a wheel. So we were really impressed, and I don't think we could have expected, you know, even half of this really, but we're very impressed. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Git Rekt. That's it.
All right,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you.